Hello there folks, back again for another video. In this one, I thought I'd do a little bit of a catch-up on everything that's been coming out regarding Warhammer Age of Sigmar and the new edition that's going to be landing in a couple of months for those people who love their fantasy. We're going to be starting off with a look at one of the miniatures that they previewed for the new starter set that's going to be dropping, I would assume anyway, and also going to fold itself into the wider range as well, I would guess. This is the new take on a Warlock Engineer for the Skaven of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Now, we've seen some clan rats and they all looked fantastic. Make sure to go and check out the other videos where we had a look at them. But this one shows off one of the new Warlock Engineers, who's a little bit more of a sniper, a little bit more of a sort of backseat player, as it were, compared to some of the other characters that you might see on the tabletop rushing forward with the rest of the swarm. Although with the Skaven, they do tend to lead from the back anyway, so I guess that kind of makes a lot of sense. In this case, we have a Warlock Engineer who's rocking a rather awesome Jezzail, like a long rifle there, alongside a little telescope, so he can have a peek at who's coming his way. He also looks to have sort of like a generator or something on his back that is sort of fueling something potentially there. There's also some discarded material and all sorts of bits and pieces on his base. He's covered in armor. The thing that I think a lot of people have said when it comes to this Warlock Engineer is that he's not particularly warlocky or engineery. In the classic sense of the Skaven. A lot of the time with the Skaven Warlock Engineers, they've tended to be sort of crackpot, slightly quirky, lots of gizmos and gadgets and things on their bodies, big claws, maybe a bit frazzled, kind of like Doc Brown style look to them. This guy seems a lot more put together, a lot more sort of like neat and prim. As neat and prim as you can be when you're a Skaven. And he also looks a little bit more utilitarian, which I think is cool, I guess. I just really hope that we're going to see some alternative sculpts for a lot of the Warlock Engineers, so that they take them in different directions. Maybe we're just going to see, because as I say, there's not really anything here that kind of screams to me more Warlock, magic, casting Skitterleap, all that kind of stuff. Because Warlock Engineers used to tend to sort of fit in that sort of boundary beneath the Grey Seer kind of thing, where they're sort of sitting in there alongside things like Plague Priests and stuff, where they could cast spells and they could use magic, but they weren't as powerful as the Grey Seers that you were adding into your armies. This guy, again, seems a little bit more militaristic, which is fine, I guess, but I hope that they throw in a few extra bits and pieces for these models in the near future. I do like the little ratty companion, that's very nice, and then the little shard of warp stone that you see there on the floor as well, or weird stone, I suppose, depending on which which angle you're taking, a Mordheim one potentially. But yes, a really nice little looking model. Seems like he's sort of concentrating and focusing on things rather than being as sort of wild and wacky as most of the Skaven used to be, but not too bad. He also looks to have either like an armored leg there, or maybe like a bionic style leg attached there, which would kind of fit in with the sort of engineering side of things, I suppose. But hopefully we'll see some more on this front. We did also get to see his War Scroll, or their War Scroll, I suppose. So yeah, move 6, health 5, pretty good. Control 2, and a 5+ save. Fantastic stuff. The Warp Block Musket, the Jezzail there, rage 24 with the 2 attacks, 3+3+, 2 rend, and D3 damage. And the crit turns it into an auto wound. Also got a melee weapon there as well, but hopefully he'll never have to use that. I do quite like the more warp energy ability. I think that's a really nice addition, and kind of fits into the Skaven mindset, that Warlock Engineer thing where he's sort of tinkering with his weapon to try and get it to fire a little bit more deadly on the battlefield. So yeah, this allows you to roll a 2+, and if you do, you set the damage characteristic of the weapon to 3 rather than it being D3. However, if you roll a 1, you take D3 mortal damage on this unit, which means that he can potentially take 1 hit and then 2 hits if you roll 2 nasty 3s on the D3. But yeah, he should be around for a while, sort of sniping miniatures off and things like that. And that works really nicely with his once per turn ability, which is Sniper Master. So normally with Guarded Hero, which we'll look at in a second, you'd be able to sort of protect your characters as they're rocking around the battlefield with the rest of your units. But the Warlock Engineer is able to kind of like pick out enemy heroes and sort of pop them from afar, which I think is quite nice with his rather deadly weapon, especially with the crit auto wounds there. I think that's pretty nasty indeed. Very cool. Guarded Heroes then is the new ability, so we'll read through this. So it's all heroes that are not monsters or war machines have guarded hero. Effect: if this hero is within the combat range of a friendly unit that is not a hero, subtract 1 from hit rolls for shooting attacks that target that hero. If that hero is infantry, they cannot be picked as the target of a shooting attack made by units more than 12 inches from them. So if you have someone like the Warlock Engineer, although of course in this case he has the Sniper Master ability, but if you have someone like him, he's not going to be able to pick out those heroes unless you have a special rule that allows you to do so. Not a lot was sort of revealed in this article, apart from what we saw here for the Warlock Engineer. As I say, bit of a shame that we didn't get to see like magic involved with the Warlock Engineers. Maybe we're going to see a couple of alternative versions of these, or they'll come up with a new designation potentially, or a title for other Skaven in your army that are more spellcaster based. But it's nice to see things like Skya, or Scryer, however you want to say it, in the keywords there for your Skaven. So they are going to potentially be looking at doing stuff based on the particular clans within the Skaven society, which I think is quite a nice little bonus there. I would hope we're going to see some really nice stuff for Eshin and Pestilence, and then also, of course, Moulder as well. I think will be really fun, especially on the big Rat Ogre front, which hopefully we'll see some more of soon, actually, because they did show off Rat Ogres in the teaser trailer for the new edition of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. But yes, Skaven, looking very nice. Cool model, just not quite as fitting as I thought it would be to the whole sort of Warlock Engineer vibe, but otherwise not too bad at all. Moving on from that, we had a look at combat and how that works now in the new edition of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and some little teasers here and there. So everything is now an ability, as you will have heard in the game. Charge is there for those people who want to charge forward into combat, obviously. So it's a friendly unit that is not in combat and has not used a run or retreat ability this turn. They get to use it, roll a charge of 2d6. I would assume if you're a model that has additional movement, you'll have 3d6 or something like that, in the case of things like dragons and things, which are quite nice. The big thing here, obviously, is that combat ranges have been sort of tightened up, so it's now half an inch of an enemy unit, which I think is quite nice. And the other thing that's quite interesting is that it says the unit can move through the combat ranges of enemy units and must end that move within 12 inches of a visible enemy unit. So I think that's quite an interesting one there as well. So you have to be able to see your unit to charge it, which makes a lot of sense. You've also then got the fight ability, which is what you do when you fight things. You declare, you do a pile-in move, which I assume is probably going to be about 3 inches, something like that, and then you'll pick your models to fight in combat. Because they've changed the combat range to be 3 inches, that means you're going to be getting at least the front rank and the back rank of miniatures, if you're sort of doing base to base, which means you're going to do a lot more attacks in combat when it comes to Warhammer Age of Sigmar at the moment, which I think is very, very nice. You've also got a little bit of a breakdown of some combat abilities as well. So the Ard Boys, as you can see here, have Shield Bash. Declare, pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit, and that charge this turn to be the target. Effect, make a Shield Bash, roll a d6 for each model in this unit. For each 6+, inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. So a very nice sort of defensive ability as people charge into them. Very characterful, builds on their equipment that they've got. While they haven't sort of mixed that into the actual stats of a model, I like that they've built that into the abilities of a particular model, rather than feeling like they had to do it based on sort of like their weapon choices and things like that. It means that all their weapons can be very general, and then the abilities are what make the models more specialized, which I think is quite a nice ability, actually. Ability. There's also the Blood Sisters with their Crystal Touch. So declare, pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll a dice. If that roll exceeds the target's health characteristic, the target has strike last for the rest of the turn, as they slowly get turned into crystal. A really nice little ability there as well. Very nice. It means you can sort of pile on the damage and potentially kill them before they get to do anything to you. So you're going to have to try and avoid those blood sisters at all costs, which I think is quite nice. Also very, very good against obviously low health models, which is always nice to see. It means they're very good at picking people off. Very brutal, very sort of Daughters of Cain, which I think is quite good. They've also sort of explained how this all sort of works. So active player gets to do their combat abilities, then the opponent gets to do their combat phase abilities, and then you do the fighting between them, which I think is quite nice. So yes, good stuff indeed. Pile-in moves, there you go, can move up to 3 inches, and must end model no further from the target unit. but in base contact if you can, which is quite nice. If your unit is not in combat, each man on that unit can move 3 inches in any direction. That move can pass through and end within the combat ranges of any enemy unit, which I think is quite good. So yes, some good stuff there for sort of manoeuvring in the middle of battle, which means that you can sort of block things off and use things to sort of shield objectives, and potentially allow yourself some time to take something off your opponent as they are trying to achieve their objectives during the turn. We also got a look at the War Scroll for the Vindictors. So this was one that's been out for a while now, obviously, but it's really nice to have a look at it. So yes, they are move 5, health 2, standard stuff for Stormcast Eternals, control 1, 3+ save built into their shields that they've been using. They have their Storm Spears, which are 2 attacks each, which is great. Hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s with a rend of 1 and a damage of 1. However, they have the anti-charge, so if they are charged that turn, then their weapons get +1 rend. So if they're able to weather the storm, as it were, then they're able to do a hefty amount of damage back to your opponent and pierce through their armor. They also have the combat phase ability, Hold the Shield Wall, which again is a very characterful ability and really builds on what they have access to, which is really nice to see. I love that kind of stuff. Really giving units a battlefield role, which is important, and it means that when you're building armies, everything is intuitive. The spearmen are good at defending things. You know, the guys with the double weapons are going to be good at diving into combat and hacking people to pieces. It just all makes sense, which is great to see. But yes, Hold the Shield Wall. If this unit did not charge this turn and is in combat with an enemy unit that charged this turn, roll a dice on a 4+, so pretty good. This unit has strike first for the rest of the turn. So not only are you going to be able to strike first, but you're also going to get the anti-charge +1 rend. So you're going to be on rend 2, hitting on 3s, wounded on 3s, which means you're going to have to really think about whether or not you actually want to charge that unit of Vindictors with your cavalry or whatever to try and chase them off the board. Although, of course, there's going to be lots of bits and pieces in between that will make it very interesting to see whether or not you can get around some of these effects and stuff, which would be very cool. But yes, Vindictors, looking very nice. I have 2 units of those, and they're very, very cool on the tabletop. We also have the Croxigors here. Talking about battlefield roles, they are very much intent on smashing infantry to pieces, as you can see there. They have their Drakebite Mauls and their Moonstone Hammers. They have 1 rend anyway, but they also have anti-infantry +1 rend. So when you're fighting infantry units on the tabletop, as you can see in the keywords at the bottom, so you can see that they'll say there on the sheet if they are infantry, then you'll get the extra rend on that, and you've already got damage 2 and damage 3 weapons anyway. So these guys are going to absolutely slaughter units on the tabletop, which I think is fantastic. They also have the Brutal Blows ability, so Croxigors swing their weapons in wide arcs, smashing aside a multitude of foes with each blow. Add 1 to the damage characteristics of this unit's melee weapon for attacks that target an enemy unit that has 10 or more models. So if you're going to be running a massive mob of miniatures on the tabletop, so huge sets of goblins or a Skaven, for example, obviously quite apt considering they're in the big launch box, then this will do a hefty amount of damage to those units. And again, really focuses in the idea that these particular Croxigor are very good at a set task. I mean, they're still hitting on 4s and 3s, wounding on 2s, which is just insane. And the damage quality is going to be pretty good anyway at taking out characters and stuff like that, or elite units, but their main focus is taking out infantry on the tabletop, and really playing around with that, which I think is quite nice. So yeah, some fun abilities there, and a nice look at some more of the war scrolls for the various units on the tabletop. The other thing they talked about in this article was that Battle Shock is gone. I think that's a good idea. It was always kind of a bummer to have to roll Battle Shock tests and things at the end of your turn, and then see models just running off the battlefield or being taken down or something in the heat of combat. I think this makes a lot more sense that units stick around and fight. People have, paid a lot of money, taken a lot of time to build and paint their miniatures, to then have them running off because you've just absolutely decimated the unit, I think is a little bit of a shame. And so removing that seems like a great idea. What they have replaced that with is Retreat, which is a new ability. So this is pick a friendly unit that is in combat to use this ability. You can get out of dodge. You can inflict D3 mortal damage on that unit. The unit can move a distance then up to its move characteristic. That unit can move through the combat ranges of other enemy units, but cannot end that move within an enemy unit's combat range. So you're going to suffer damage to pull out of combat, but it also allows you to sort of maneuver around and get yourself into different places, and that's used in the movement phase, as you can see there. So there is still that element of fatigue and damage to units over time, but it's more based on the general's sort of abilities and things, and what they want to do in their maneuvers and stuff on the tabletop, rather than it just being down to just being smashed in the face by the enemy. As I say, Battle Shock always felt like it was something that didn't necessarily work very well. I think morale and the way that it works in Warhammer Fantasy Battles works really nicely. I think because you've got that much grander scale, lots more units on the tabletop, it feels like it fits into a rank and flank game. Because of the skirmish nature of games like Age of Sigmar, I think having something like Retreat in there is a little bit of a better way of approaching this kind of thing, rather than it being sort of forced upon you. So, as I say, you lose your toys. Considering that the whole sort of morale issue is kind of a weird one in Warhammer 40,000, and Battleshock never seems to really do anything. I mean, there's plenty of games that people have played where it just doesn't either do anything or it's incredibly important. So it's a bit swingy. I think maybe when we move to that new edition, we'll see something change on that in that regard. But otherwise, interesting stuff there for Warhammer Age of Sigmar with that new retreat ability. I think it's a great move in the right direction. We have a few more things to dive into and have a look at. So yes, we're going to have a look at some magic stuff as well. They had a little bit of a chat about how magic works now. Spellcasters have a sort of wizard value on them, if you're a wizard in this case, and that will dictate how many times they can cast off a single spell or do banishes or do unbinds during your phases. And since you can cast spells in the opponent's phase now, with a minus, obviously, I think that's a really nice little addition. So in this case, we have the Weird Knob Shaman. He is Wizard 1, so he can cast one spell, he can dispel, etc., whatever, unbind per phase. And he then has access to a entire suite of spells, rather than it being you having to choose a particular spell for your character when you build your army. So that was one of the things that was a bit of a bummer for playing the current edition of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, is that when you set up your army and you add your spellcasters into the mix, you could choose a particular spell, and then when it came to the tabletop, you'd be like, it doesn't necessarily work very well at this particular point or against this army. Especially if you're doing larger tournament play and stuff like that, where you have a set list going through everything. You need to try and pick the spell that works the best in all circumstances. So it doesn't necessarily turn into being particularly fun in that case. This time around, you have access to the entire spell lore, so a lot of the time you'll be able to just choose different spell for the set moment or for the set turn, etc., against a particular enemy and make the most use of it. It should mean that you'll be able to access loads of different stuff and play around with lots of different spells. You'll all have your favourites, and it'll be really nice to see how that all works together when you play your games. It's also been pointed out that characters like the Weird Knob Shaman have had some of their abilities, their spells, moved into their attacks, effectively. So Green Puke has become a ranged weapon attack, as you can see there, and can shoot in combat, which is quite a nice little addition, as we talked about in a previous video, that you can't shoot in combat anymore unless you have ability that allows you to do so. And then also you have the Brutal Power there as well, so that adds to the unit's power level, while there are any friendly Iron Jaws units that have 10 or more models whole within 12 of it, so their power level goes up from 1 to 2, which is very nice. Talking of spells, we had a couple. We have one really nice one to look at. So that in the top right-hand corner, as you can see just behind my face, is the casting value. So you roll 2d6 in order to try and cast it. And then your power level, your wizard level can add to that, which I think is quite cool. I think so, anyway, possibly. Someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong there. Then what you'll do is you can pick a friendly Iron Jaws wizard to cast this spell, pick a visible enemy unit within 18 inches of them to be the target, and then make a casting roll of 2d6. There you go. Inflict d3 mortal damage on the target. If the target is a wizard, inflict 3 mortal damage on the target instead, which is very nice to see. You also have the Unbind, so any friendly wizard within 30 inches of the enemy wizard casting the spell can make an unbinding roll of 2d6. If the roll exceeds the casting roll for the spell, then the spell is unbound and its effect is not resolved. This reaction cannot be used more than once per casting roll, which is very nice. And importantly, if the roll exceeds the casting roll for the spell, so if you roll a 12, you've got the spell off and there's nothing that anyone can do to you. However, as you can see here, a double 1 when the spell is miscast, the caster takes D3 mortal damage and can cast no more spells in the phase. But maybe the spell will still go off. You never know, I suppose. On the other side of things, you also have priests. As someone who plays Stormcast Eternals, I do like my priests. We have the stats for a Slaughter Priest here. They are Priest 1, so much like with a Wizard, they can cast or sort of unbind effectively, but not in terms of priests. What do they call it? Banish. There we go. Banish. So yep, they have a whole range of different stuff there as well, and we saw one of the blessings that you can do. We'll talk about blessings and how they work. So blessings have a casting limit effectively, or a target that you need to make. So what you do is when you go to chant a prayer, you will roll a d6, and on a roll of a 2+, your priest gains that many ritual points that accumulate over multiple turns. So you roll a dice, you get 5 prayer points, ritual points, sorry. You can then spend those to cast certain abilities or blessings on the tabletop. So here you can see that the Witchbane's Curse has a sort of casting value effectively of 4 with the ritual points. However, if you are able to get it up to an 8+, so you decide to take your time and you build up the ritual points over the course of maybe multiple turns or multiple phases potentially, then you'll be able to cast the Witchbane Curse at a much higher level and do more damage to your opponent. There is a risk, however. You could sit there building up the ritual points in order to cast some of those bigger prayers and bring them to the tabletop. But when you roll a 1, you lose D3 ritual points as your prayer starts to be pulled apart. The interesting thing is that prayers cannot be unbound. So it's all about trying to sort of keep an eye on priests and their abilities. It's a little bit like how bound spells and bound prayers and things used to work in sort of Warhammer Fantasy Battles back in the day, in my opinion anyway. But it's a really nice little sort of mini game within the game of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I think it's come together really nicely. You'll also be able to bring up your mighty endless spells and all sorts of different things like that. As someone who doesn't necessarily use a lot of things like endless spells and stuff, it's not really one that I'm particularly interested in. I'm sure as we move to the new edition, more people are going to be showing off more things like Purple Suns and everything else in between. But yeah, you can also do things like you can banish the manifestations on the tabletop, which is a good bonus. Moving on, we have some more stuff to dive into. This is for battle packs, battle plans, and generals handbooks work. They have put together a fun set of new missions for you to play through. First Blood is the first of these, and this is kind of like included in the core rules, and uses all of your advanced stuff as well, and will kind of give you a way to sort of dive into your games and have some fun playing through. What you do when you dive in, you'll have your battle plan, as you can see here. It'll explain your objectives and where they're placed on the battlefield. But there'll also be a twist that is added into the mix as well. So in this case, the twist is at the start of the battle round, if there is an underdog, so the person who has less victory points, they can pick an objective. That objective is no longer controlled by either player and cannot be controlled this battle round. So it's a good way of kind of leveling the playing field and allowing you to play around with the idea that you can't just focus on controlling 2 or 3 objectives. You have to really think about the entire battlefield, because you know your opponent is going to do something later on in the game to try and mess with you, which I think is quite cool. The other thing to note as well is that the General's Handbook and the match play stuff is all going to be done based on a yearly cycle. So once we get the stuff for the new edition in a couple of months, that will carry us through all the way to next year, sort of summertime. So it means that you're not going to be hit with updates every 3 months, 6 months, etc. It's going to last all the way through to next year. So if you are playing tournaments, you'll have lots of time to kind of get used to the games. And if you're someone like me who plays more casually, then you'll have more chance to sort of play through an entire book of stuff and have some fun with it, which I think is quite nice. There's also additional things like seasonal rules that will be brought in, which will be quite nice. There's also lots of battle plans and things from previous editions from previous years that have been brought back into the fold. There's going to be 12 of them, as you can see there, plucked from the past 8 years of competitive play and reimagined for the new edition, which is quite nice. All based around particular ideas and themes, and all of them have that awesome twist and things. So, for example, Border Wars. Victory points scored by each player from controlling objectives are capped at a maximum of 6 per turn. Add 1 to hit rolls for units in the underdog's army if they charge this turn and are contesting the objective wholly within enemy territory, making you push forward into your opponent's territory and do some damage to them, which I think is quite nice. Really, really helps out on that front. The other thing to note is this particular bit here. So for each battle plan in the General's Handbook, your victory points each round will add up to a maximum of 10 for a maximum total of 50 points per battle. Makes it nice and easy on the tabletop, which is quite nice. We also had this one for The Vice. I thought I'd talk about the twist on this one, because this is a really fun little one. At the start of the second battle round, after determining which player is the active player must remove the 4 starting objectives and set up a new objective at each of the next locations on the map. At the start of the 4th battle round, after determining which player is the active player must remove the 4 and move them into the center of the map. This, at the end of their turn, the underdog can pick one objective, inflict D3 mortal damage on each unit contesting that objective, roll separately for each unit, because things are collapsing in around them as a crevasse falls atop them. As some people have pointed out, this is very much like playing Fortnite, but in Age of Sigmar, which I think is a nice little bonus there, and a fun objective for you to try out. The season rule adds additional bonuses. In this case, it is Honor Guard for 2024 and into 2025. And this gives you the Bodyguard ability. So declare pick a friendly unit in your general's regiment that is not your general to be the Honor Guard. You can pick a unit in your reserve. If you use this ability, you cannot use any of the Honor Guard abilities. And importantly, as it says there, general's regiment, which is quite nice. Subtract 1 from the attack characteristics of enemy units' melee weapons while they're in combat with your general if both of the following are true. The Honor Guard is wholly within 6 inches of your general. The Honor Guard did not charge this turn. So there's a real focus on having somebody around your leader as a bodyguard, keeping them alive. Great for things like Praetors and stuff like that in your Stormcast Eternals. Just have a big burly set of warriors watching over your general as they do all the fighting, which is quite nice indeed. So yes, lots of fun stuff there when it comes to how battles are played out and how they work. If there's anything you wanted to share about battle packs and things in the comments, make sure to do so. Do you like the idea of there always being a twist added into the mix? What would you like to see them do differently? Is the focus on objectives cool? Do you think they should be shifting things up a little bit? Is it nice to see some of those older battle packs and battle plans coming back to the tabletop, or would you prefer if it was all new? Obviously, be interesting to see what you think about that one. But tied into battle packs and battle plans, there's also the addition of battle tactics. So battle tactics, these are the things that you achieve each turn. In addition to your main objectives, they kind of give you little side quests for you to do, which I always enjoy because it helps replicate the flow and the twist of battle as your generals try and ask you to do different things, and it helps build on the narrative of your experience on the tabletop. It's not just about controlling point X, Y, and Z. It's a little bit more about there being a sort of like overall narrative experience happening and you having to react to what's going on around the tabletop. A little bit like a sort of like Hollywood movie and things like that, as sort of your spanners are thrown into the works and everything. So yes, bum bum bum. Tactical Gambit. You cannot use this ability if you went second in the previous battle round and you choose to go first, so if you chose to do the double turn. Effect, pick a battle tactic that has not yet been attempted. You can attempt to complete that battle tactic this turn. So just like in the current edition of the game, battle tactics are there for you to try and attempt each turn. So here's where this sort of flows back into some discussion we had previously. You can only pick a battle tactic you haven't yet attempted, and a crucial change in the new edition is that you can't pick a battle tactic if you win the priority roll and choose to take a second consecutive turn. Importantly, however, if your opponent wins the priority roll and decides to let you take 2 turns in a row, which is something we were worried about, you can still take a battle tactic. You cannot be forced to miss out. So there's a real interesting dilemma there for players at the tabletop. Do you take the double turn and do lots more damage and miss out on doing a battle tactic? And of course, if you choose to try and make somebody else do it, they get to try and have fun, which is quite an interesting way of doing things. Each battle plan in the core rules and the new General's Handbook allows you to score a maximum of 10 victory points each round. So winning the priority roll and taking 2 turns in a row means forfeiting your ability to score 4 of those 10 points, which is an interesting twist, especially when it comes to the sort of more competitive side of things. Looking at some of the universal battle tactics, we have some that have been sort of like expanded and try and encourage you to dive into games and have some fun. So seize the center. You complete this battle tactic at the start of your turn if 2 or more friendly units are within 3 inches of the center of the battlefield and are not in combat. Sounds nice and easy to do, but as they point out in the article just above it, what about if your opponent uses covering fire or countercharge and pushes forward to try and stop you from doing these particular objectives? You've also got take the flanks. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if you have at least 1 friendly unit within 6 inches of each short battlefield edge. None of those units are wholly within friendly territory, and none of these units are set up this turn. So another fun one there for sort of spreading things out on the tabletop. And then last but not least, slay the entourage. Pick a unit in the enemy's general's regiments. You complete this battle tactic if that unit is destroyed this turn. So, again, an interesting one that feeds back into army building, because when you build up the enemy general's regiment, do you flood it with lots and lots of options for lots and lots of big units that are a bit squishy because you have access to more units when you build your regiment for your general? Or do you fill it full of proper elite troops that are hard to kill because you don't want to give up slay the entourage really easily because you don't want your opponent to take it? So an interesting one there. I think it's very cool. You've also then got a little bit of a change in how battle tactics work for particular armies. So previous to this edition, which is coming up later this year, obviously, each faction had their own battle tactics that were included in their battle tome, and they were all specific to them. So, for example, Stormcast Eternals had a whole bunch about sort of like controlling areas of the board, reclaiming them for Sigmar, etc., etc., etc. This meant that when it came to setting up for a game and talking about the battle tactics that you could do, you kind of had to guess what your opponent was potentially had in their book and sort of learn over time, like, so the Soulblight player has all of these ones, but the Flesh Eater Quartz player has all of these ones. So it was a lot more book learning to be done. What they've done in the new edition is that they've tied it specifically to the Grand Alliances. So there aren't individual ones for particular factions anymore, which sounds like a really great idea because you just learn the ones that are in the General's Handbook. Easy. There are 2 per Grand Alliance, and they've shown off one of them for each of them. So, Order have reclaimed the realms. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if there are 1 or more friendly units wholly within each quarter of the battlefield and more than 6 inches from all enemy units. So a great one for destroying your enemies and controlling different sections of the board, which has actually been taken, I think, from a lot of the order books anyway. So a nice little bonus one there. Chaos have Unordained Charge. Pick an objective controlled by your opponent. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if 2 or more friendly units charge this turn. Nice and easy. 1 or more of those units are contesting that objective and you control that objective. Awesome stuff. Very chaosy. Death, marked for the grave. Pick a non-hero enemy unit that has not had any models slain this battle. If there are no non-hero enemy units on the battlefield, you pick an enemy unit. Pick any enemy unit. A hero, for example. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if that unit is destroyed this turn. So great for just basically turning things into corpses. Makes a lot of sense for death. And then destruction have time to get stuck in. Pick 3 friendly units that are not in combat and are wholly within friendly territory. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if each of these units is wholly outside of your territory and used a fight ability this turn. Very, very cool indeed. Probably something that you want to use on, I'd say, like turn 2 potentially. Move forward to sort of like the edge of your territory, and then in second turn, rush forward towards the enemy and get stuck in. Very destruction based. As you can see, really good stuff there, tied into the different battle tactics. All seems to work very, very nicely, and a nice bonus update to what we've seen in the current edition for the new one. Pardon me. Next time around, they're going to be looking at Spearhead and how that all works. But as you can see, some really fun stuff there for the way that your games work in terms of battle tactics and battle packs. Magic, pardon me, the combat ranges, and also that new model for the Skaven as well. I'm going to move off before my hiccups make this video a pain in the ass. But yes, let me know what you think of the new miniature and all the new rules that we've been seeing for Warhammer Age of Sigmar. And I'll be back in another video very, very soon. Bye for now.